Hello traders, this is your stockalert.com here today to bring you the chart of GELV, Green Energy Live Incorporated, which trades on the OTCBB. The first thing we're going to notice about this chart is that the stock has been in a downtrend for the last 6 months. You can easily see this by drawing a regression channel. Let's see. Guess we'll have to draw this one by hand. Technology can only go so far, as we can see. We're going to ignore the outliers and just go by closes. And as we can see, it's forming a pretty classic down trend. With that said, something interesting that we've noticed is that quite recently, in the month of September, the trend seems to have bottomed out, as we can see. And instead of crashing at the same speed, it started to consolidate around the 0.0004 and the 0.006 levels. So the first thing we're going to do for this particular chart is identify the current lines of support and the current lines of resistance. I know what you're probably thinking. This bottom out line of 0.0004 is probably support. Well, if you were thinking that, you are correct. This is the current support for the moment. And as we're looking for the resistance, let's see. Our current resistance happens to be the top of the consolidation line at 0.0006. We're in a pretty tight trading range right now, as you can see, between 0.04 and 0.0006, which is to be expected during the consolidation after a long trend, especially a long downtrend. Judging from the other indicators, let's look at the RSI. Turn that back to red. RSI. You can see that we've been heavily oversold for a long time, and the stock is just finally starting to stabilize. We'll reach full stabilization around 50. And as you can see, we're at about 43.72. So there's still a little bit of ways to go before we're considered stable. Now the good thing about being in this position is that there's a lot of room for this stock to grow before we be considered overbought. Now the other thing to consider, however, is that this stock has remained oversold for quite some time. So we're not expecting a huge, powerful bounce here as we would if the stock had simply crashed suddenly and was expected to rise suddenly. However, instead, we can expect a nice slow climb, which usually allows investors to keep the gains that they are making, which in this situation would be very substantial, simply because we're at the sub-penny level and every slight gain is a huge profit. Let's look at the accumulation and distribution. As we can see, even though there was this huge downtrend at the time, accumulation and distribution stayed pretty steady. So you can see the line is just slightly slanted downward as the price line fell much more sharply. This tells us that buyers and sellers stayed relevantly the same during this period, and since we can see that this period was of low volume, we can assume that there were only a few sellers that were pushing the price down as they tried to escape the stock. The interesting thing to note is that quite recently distribution has increased, yet the stock has managed to relatively keep about the same price. And even more interesting is that accumulation has actually started to rise after a fall, which usually leads us to believe that the stock is starting to bounce from its consolidation, and at the end of that consolidation period the stock will move upward. Looking at our next indicator, we have the ADX. As we can see, the ADX is below 20, which means there's no current trend in sight. However, at 19.88, we have to take in consideration that a trend could possibly start to appear. As we can see, the negative DI is slightly above the positive DI, making this non-trend trend bearish, and as we can see, just because it was coming out of a downtrend, that is to be expected. So right now the ADX isn't telling us much. In conclusion, your team at yourstockalert.com thinks that GELV has bottomed out quite well, as we can see. It's coming from a very strong downtrend, so we don't expect the stock to fall lower anytime soon, at least not a very drastic fall. And because of this consolidation, if we can break 0.0006, we expect the stock to run, and it could run all the way up to about 0.001 before breaching all of this resistance here. As always, use proper trade management and pick your entry and exit points before the trade. This is yourstockalert.com signing out.